That's your size compared. So those are among the tallest buildings in the world, including the Empire State Building, World Trade Center, Sears Tower, Chicago. So if you lay it on its side, you take 2 or 3 of them to fill it in, because the width is almost 200 feet wide. And actually much more than 2,000, close to, including everything, it's about 2,500 feet in length to the end. And it's going to be beautiful.
We have entered the "my pond is bigger than your house" part of the Trump presidency. I don't even know why those things are on the same piece of paper. Someone should have told him one was a body of water, the other 3 are buildings. All the same, he's obsessed with the size of things shaped like that. Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. That was real. It was another in a growing chronicle of things I asked my team to vet to make sure it wasn't AI, that was actually the president, not some stunt guy, that was actually from the Oval Office, not a Jimmy Kimmel, skit, that was the president, that was actually what he was holding, that it wasn't actually a map of something, and that he actually had a board with a body of water next to 3 buildings and was bragging that the body of water was bigger than the buildings. That happened today. It's part of his obsession with home decorating and renovations of Washington, D.C. This is the reflecting pool. He's, for some reason, measuring it against the length of the pool against the height of skyscrapers. Makes no sense at all. I'm embarrassed even reading this to you, especially at a moment when Americans are screaming from the rooftops about the price of gas, cost of childcare, cost of health care, and the economy, as well as unhappy about the war with Iran. But Trump is obsessed with this stuff. He's done a redo of the South Lawn. That is a live picture of what he's done to what was the once beautiful, beautiful grounds of the White House. This is his cage match thing. It looks like something at a amusement park or something. It's a place where they're going to have a fight. He's demolished large swaths of the people's house to build a ballroom. He's paved the Rose Garden. He put his name on the Kennedy Center, which the Washington Post today reports will have to take it down. They have to remove it by Friday. He's done all of these things, not on a wave of the public loving his agenda, but he's done them instead of helping even his own voters with the cost of living and the things they're stressed about. As for the war that he began, that war is deeply unpopular, but it's also causing gas prices to surge. On that, he says he's, quote, bored. When it comes to the deeply unpopular, quite possibly illegal $1.8 billion slush fund to aid his allies, it's a slush fund that even members of his own party object to. He's now contradicted his own acting attorney general and will not assert whether or not it is alive or dead. He calls it, quote, beautiful. The fund's future is so unclear that Congress is now trying to formally kill it. The Senate today voted on a motion that would permanently ban the fund's existence. Republicans killed that legislation, not because they want to save the fund, but because of other procedural things. Meanwhile, Trump's approval rating has reached a new low amid all this. The latest YouGov Economist poll finds Trump's approval rating at 35%. His disapproval is at a whopping 61%. This is the lowest approval rating of any president since the survey started to exist in 2009. Trump focusing more on himself than the American people is where we begin the hour with Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin of Michigan. She's a member of both the Homeland Security and Armed Services committees. Senator, I'm embarrassed that was the news that we had to contend with today, but we don't make up the news. What do you make of where we are?
I mean, yeah, that was quite an intro. I mean, I think, look, I mean, I think what's been interesting is to watch my Republican colleagues, I think, start to get the message a little bit that aligning yourself every moment of every day with Donald Trump is not a path to victory for you, for your legacy, for the country. And I think this weaponization fund vote, you alluded to it, where the president was trying to put $1.8 billion of taxpayer dollars in a special fund that he controlled to decide who should listen to the courts, who has been aggrieved. I think it hit this wall with the Republicans that I think is important. And I think, but it fits into a bigger narrative of the president just feeling like he doesn't have to follow the rules. His people don't have to follow the rules. He can do whatever he wants, regardless of our tradition and our democracy. I think, you get absurd introductions, no offense, like that, when you hit kind of a new low with this level of activity coming from the White House.
I mean, no offense taken, but I do feel like I participated in the sane washing, right? I said grab him in the bleep for years. If we'd said what he really said, I don't know that as many women would have voted for him in 2016, and I'll never know. I was one of the first people to stop platforming his live events. I still have a very hard time taking his live events because he lies the whole time. I mean, where do you stand in terms of how much you think people need to know about, let's just take the corruption. I mean, it started with the Qatari jet. It sort of was ushered in formally with the crypto grift. There is now, as you just articulated, a plan to take $1.8 billion taxpayer dollars and give them to people up to and including violent insurrectionists.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've seen around the world that, corruption eventually, when it seeps down into the meat and people feel it in their own lives, they respond. That was the narrative on what happened in Hungary, where they got rid of their president who had been corrupt for 12 years. And it was interesting. Hungary is an interesting example for us to look at because, the deal that Viktor Orban offered the Hungarian people was, look, leave alone my corruption at the high levels, leave alone my threats to democracy. If I fire a university leader here or curb the media there, leave it alone because I'm going to make your economy better. I'm going to put more money in your pocket. That was the trade. And it worked for a while. And then it didn't. And it didn't because the corruption seeped so deep that you couldn't build a bridge in rural Hungary without paying someone off. It didn't work when the best friends, the eccentric billionaire best friends of the president of Hungary started doing whatever they wanted and treating Hungary as like the cow that they could milk. And it didn't work when he precipitated false threats and tried to bring in the security forces at the very end to prevent him from losing. I think that's a very interesting example. And you see certainly whispers of that same thing going on here in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that same poll that has his approval rating at a record low has his approval on the economy even lower. Americans' views on the economy, 76% say it's poor or fair, just 20% say it's good or excellent. What are you hearing from your constituents in terms of their economic concerns?
Yeah, I mean, look, a year ago, the president said, I'm going to come in, I'm going to change your life. And he ran on that. And look, I'll give it to him. He shellacked Democrats in 2024 with the very simple message that his priority was putting more money in your pocket. Whether he was ever truthful about that or not, that's what he ran on. And Democrats had too many priorities. We had every priority. And so no one knew what we'd really go to the mats on. And so Trump won my state and he won the country. Fast forward a year later, and frankly, before the war, I would say the only cost in a family's life that had gone down under President Trump had been gas, price of gas, right? Not housing, not health care, not groceries, not trips, services. And now every single American is paying the price of this war, of his war, and particularly feeling that, they see the price of gas 20 times when they drive to work. So it could not be more clear that people are suffering, especially in my state, and they're feeling like that being in the middle class is like a dream that their parents got to accomplish, but not them. So I think that even if people are sometimes reluctant to say that they regret their vote or they're switching sides or whatever, that they, in their hearts, they can't say with a straight face that they are better off under Donald Trump.
I have to ask you, because of your years of service, your reaction to Bill Pulte being given a third job in the Trump administration. He will, I think at the end of this month, become the acting director of national intelligence.
Yeah, I have pretty fundamental problems with Bill Pulte becoming the Director of National Intelligence, or acting Director of National Intelligence. As someone who helped start that office, I was one of the first 10 employees when, frankly, under the Bush administration, it was set up. Number one, he has no national security experience. We can't even figure out if he's ever handled classified information, if he has a security clearance whatsoever. So he's never dealt with sensitive issues of national security. But number two, much more importantly, is that he has shown in his current job that he has zero qualms taking an order from Trump to go into the personal records of American citizens and dig up false claims, let's say in this case on mortgage fraud. He's done it against Adam Schiff, Tish James, Lisa Cook. So he has shown not only an interest, but a willingness to actually use his job to manipulate information to do the bidding of Donald Trump, to weaponize the government against people. So if you take that example, proven, and you overlay that, you take that to the DNI's office with all of the access to classified information, our most sensitive tools, it should send a shiver down the spine of anyone who gives a crap about national security and about the personal privacy of American citizens. And as someone who, the president tried to criminally indict over a 90-second video, I've had the government weaponized against me. The idea of someone like that in charge of all of our, 17 different intelligence agencies is just disturbing. I heard the president backtracking on this because even my Republican colleagues are not on board.
Graham Plattner, Democratic candidate for Senate in Maine, joins me now. Mr. Plattner, it's good to have you on. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
I just want to say at the start that, we've had you on before, and I think you and I are both people that in other contexts talk about income inequality and healthcare and all those issues, which are extremely important, and we devote a lot of time to on this program. This is not, the thing that we spend a lot of time chasing. But there's some serious stuff there I want to go through with you, and I think voters have a right to know about it. And I want to start with what Ms. Fifield says about being rough is the term the Times. And I'm going to just read you the account so you have it. This is from the Times. Mr. Plattner could be rough with her, Ms. Fifield said, particularly when they were drinking, leaving her shaken and sometimes afraid. In the interviews, she grappled with how to process her experiences. She was quick to note, he never hit me, he never punched me. She said he regularly grabbed her by the shoulders, sometimes hard enough to leave marks. On one occasion, yanked her out of a cab by her wrist after an argument in which she wanted to stay in the car. During one argument, she recalled he twisted her arm behind her back, shoved her into a bedroom, and held the door closed from the other side so she couldn't get out, telling her to remain there until she was calm. Eventually, Ms. Fifield said she fell asleep and left the next morning. It hurt, she said, but she added, it didn't cause any injury. It didn't break my arm. Did that happen?
No, it did not. There are some allegations in this piece that I just want to be kind of unequivocal about are simply not true. Anything alleging physicality, anything alleging that I knew what my tattoo was, these are the statements of someone who's politically motivated. In this piece, there's a lot about my struggling, not being a good boyfriend, certainly self-medicating with alcohol, and I've been very upfront since the beginning of this campaign that was a pretty dark period of my life after I came back from my combat service, and that's what that kind of life looks like. And so there are things in this that I absolutely will take responsibility for and have been speaking about openly for months now. But those serious allegations are just not true.
You did not grab her by the wrist. You did not put your hands on her shoulders. You did not push her into a room that you closed the door on. She's lying about that, is what you're saying.
Yes, that is not true.
You mentioned the tattoo. So I want to talk about that because I think this was troubling to a lot of people, and I think, again, your account of it assuaged some of that fear, clearly in Maine voters, as reflected, again, by reporting and polling. She says, same person, that you referred to the tattoo as my Totenkampf, which is the German word for this particular Nazi symbol. There's other reporting in Jewish Insider in October in which an anonymous acquaintance says you used that same phrase. Did you know what this tattoo was about before last October when you said you first became aware of it?
No, I did not. And I also think it's important to note that it's very likely, and I think that she is that same source. She's the person who's been telling people this from the beginning. And so I feel like, we're kind of rehashing the thing we've been through. I had that tattoo for 17 years. It's a skull and crossbones. I got it with other Marines who I served with in Iraq, in Croatia. And in the time that I had it, I got a security clearance with the State Department. I re-enlisted in the United States Army, where I was screened for gang and hate tattoos. And I took my shirt off in front of my family, many of whom are Jewish. We even released as a campaign a video, which you're putting up on the screen right now, of me dancing at my brother's wedding to his wife, who is Jewish, and her fully extended Jewish family. And I would not have taken my shirt off in that context if I had known. And so any statement saying that I did know is again, totally false.
I do want to follow up one place on this, and I don't want to get too forensic, but, you know, the Times basically reported that they saw texts of hers, including a text in August, I believe August 3rd of last year. This would be before October of last year, in which she basically said that you had a, quote, Nazi tattoo, and she joked about how she's going to go volunteer for Collins. Now, again, this is a text that got sent, so, like, we can place the time, right? This is in August. How does she know it's a Nazi tattoo in August of last year, and you don't know it's a Nazi tattoo in August of last year?
Well, she certainly didn't send that text to me. So whoever she sent it to and was talking to, that's I can't say why, but I will say that I certainly didn't know, and the text messages she's sending to friends who may have recognized it, they didn't tell me that. So,
can we talk? I want to talk about the piece that came out before this, which was about what your wife had alerted your internal campaign folks to, and just to sort of stipulate to get out ahead that, like, I think some people view this as a real betrayal by your former campaign manager, and that may be true, and I understand. And I also watched the video that your wife put out, which I found incredibly compelling and moving, about what you've worked through. But just to be clear again on the details here, and there's obviously two subtexts here, right? This is you facing Maine voters at a primary and also a general election that's going to happen. We all know that, right? We're all on the same page. Were you sending sexually explicit messages to other women back in 2023, 2024, as reported in the piece?
So this is the first time in my life that Amy and I's marriage has been the interest of people besides Amy and I.
Yes.
And it's definitely a bit jarring, a bit strange. Yeah. It's also a marriage that is very strong and that I do believe we deserve some privacy in. I will just say this. At the beginning of our marriage, I made mistakes, and Amy held me accountable for them, and we worked through them. And the work that we did made our marriage significantly stronger. And who we are today is an incredibly faithful and happy married couple. Amy is my best friend. I love her more than anything else. And quite honestly, the hardest part about this whole campaign is I don't get to spend as much time with her as I like to. And so it has been it's been a hard experience to have gone through this together as a couple long before our lives were brought out into the public, and then to have it essentially outed by someone that we put our trust in, who then turned around and betrayed Amy's trust, and has now turned, frankly, our private parts of our marriage into a bit of a public political spectacle. It's hard, but it's our marriage. And it's a good marriage, and we're very happy in it and very happy with each other. And I thank my lucky stars every single day that Amy is my wife and that she has given me a lot of grace and a lot of love over the years. And I'm a lucky man for it.
I'm here from you. You don't want to get into specifics and details, and I can respect part of that. But I do want to just make sure on the timeline, right? Because I think there's two things going through people's heads a little bit here, which is, you know, you have talked about self-medicating with alcohol and being pretty messed up when you got back from the service and trying to figure out what you're doing and doing things maybe you wouldn't stand by now and saying things you wouldn't stand by. But this is 2023. And so there's a difference in the time. And I think the first question is, like, when did this stop? If there was stuff that you're not proud of that you worked out with your wife and you don't want to talk about the details, when did it stop?
Oh, it stopped when it was happening. I mean, like, it was Amy and I, it happened soon after we got married. And we dealt with it very, very early in our relationship. And So that's when it stopped.
Are there texts of yours, pictures of yours floating around out there, which, again, maybe from a time capsule, but people, I think, are understandably a little nervous. Maybe you'll be the nominee, probably be the nominee for the Maine Senate on Tuesday. And then it's October 10th, and here's a text or picture of Graham Plattner that is not the kind of thing that you want to see. Like, are you worried about that? Are there texts like that?
I'm not worried about it. I mean, I went, as I've talked to him, I went through my life through a number of years struggling and not exactly acting with the best behavior. I've been very, very open about that. And if people would like to continue to drag things up from that time in my life, I'm sure that we are going to see at some point somebody attempt to do exactly that. Just know that these are things that happened before I became a public figure, before I got into politics, and it's a part of my life that I'm very happy to talk about and talk about the struggles within. And so I do think that as we move forward, you know, what we've built up here is really something quite spectacular. It's very new. And I think one of the reasons why it's worked so well is because I have been very open with the people of Maine. I go all over the state. I've held over 80 town halls, and I ask or I answer questions from Mainers regardless of what the question is. I've made myself very accessible to people, and I want them to know about my struggles because I firmly believe that if you believe in a transformational politics, you got to believe in the ability for people to transform. And my journey is one of transformation. And I'm very happy to talk about that earlier part in my life. And I have no doubt that people will attempt to continue to revisit Reddit posts, continue to try to revisit parts of my past. But I think what's really important to note here is that these are things that I talk about in my past, things that I'm not proud of, but it is a past that I had to go through to get where I am today, and I'm very proud of who I am today, and I'm very proud of the movement that we've built up here in Maine.
Just to be clear, just about revisiting, right? I mean, I think channeling concerns, I think, of Democratic voters and Democratic officials and a lot of people, right? That it's not a question of revisiting, right? It's new revelations, like vis-a-vis, texts or pictures. And I know you want to give some privacy in marriage, but I really do feel like I need to get these answers from you, which is like, the people you were texting with, whatever that was, in whatever context they were adult women, you knew that, and it was consensual. Is that true?
Yes.
And you have that you confirmed that. You knew their age.
Yes. Oh, God. I mean, yeah. Yes, of course.
Back in the days when I was writing television drama and casting actors in a couple of TV series, I could tell you the moment when the actor got the part. With Audra McDonald, who was already a Tony winner, it was when she walked in. She owned the room before speaking a word. With another actor, it was when he leaned on a word in a line in a very surprising way that I didn't expect when I wrote it. And with someone else, it was when she smiled through lines when others were fighting back tears over those same lines. And so, leaning on my now very much faded authority about the audition process, I have the strong suspicion that in Todd Blanche's audition, he got the part when he said this.
As to whether or not I want this job, I did not ask for this job. I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime. And if President Trump chooses to keep me as acting, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate me, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and I go back to being the DAG, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to go do something else, I will say, thank you very much. I love you, sir.
I don't know that I've ever seen anyone more afraid in front of a Justice Department microphone. I mean, he sounded kind of terrified there. But I love you, sir. That was the moment. That was Todd Blanche's audition moment that got him the job, because that was the moment when Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, now is acting attorney general, and as of late last night, Donald Trump's nominee to be the next Senate-confirmed attorney general. That was Todd Blanche saying to Donald Trump, I will do anything for you. I mean anything. That was Todd Blanche debasing himself publicly in his audition for a Trump cabinet post more desperately than anyone else in Trump world who has ever engaged in the process of publicly begging for a job from Donald Trump. Republican senators confirmed Todd Blanche in his first Senate confirmation proceeding as Deputy Attorney General. Todd Blanche did not do so well in the nonpartisan evaluation he submitted to in a Manhattan courtroom, where he defended Donald Trump against 34 charges of business fraud in Donald Trump's scheme to pay off the porn star Stormy Daniels, to buy her silence about her very brief encounter with Donald Trump in a hotel room when Donald Trump's third and current wife was home with their 4-month-old baby. Stormy Daniels testified under oath to that jury of New Yorkers who believed her. Donald Trump did not testify in his own defense. That left his defense in the very weak hands of Todd Blanche, who managed to get Donald Trump 34 guilty verdicts from that jury, who decided beyond a reasonable doubt that Stormy Daniels was telling them the truth and Todd Blanche was not telling them the truth, and that Donald Trump was, in fact, very, very, very guilty. So Stormy Daniels was more credible with that jury than Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche's lies work with most Republican senators and most Republican members of the House of Representatives, but they have never worked anywhere else, as that jury showed. Utterly stupid, morally wrong. Those exact words came from the former Republican leader of the United States Senate, Senator Mitch McConnell, who will have a vote on Todd Blanche's Senate confirmation. And this time, Senator McConnell might not be as sure a vote for Todd Blanche's confirmation as he was the first time, because on May 21st, Senator Mitch McConnell said, so the nation's top law enforcement official is asking for a slush fund to pay people who assault cops. Utterly stupid, morally wrong, take your pick. So there's Mitch McConnell, still one of the most important players in the United States Senate, saying Todd Blanche, in his official conduct as acting attorney general, has been utterly stupid, morally wrong. And that is why, when the current Republican leader of the Senate, John Thune, who learned the ways of leadership under Mitch McConnell, was asked today if Todd Blanche will have a hard time getting confirmed as Attorney General, the Republican leader said, quote, hard to say. That is not what Republican Senate leaders usually say when a Republican president nominates an Attorney General. They always greet the nomination enthusiastically and guarantee confirmation. And there is usually no reason for the Senate Majority Leader to think there will be any problem confirming any member of the cabinet for the president. But today, John Thune is saying, hard to say about Todd Blanche. Senator Thune said, this is an environment where nothing's a safe or sure bet these days. It is the same environment in which enough Republicans in the House of Representatives defected yesterday to join the Democrats in passing a war powers resolution to stop Donald Trump's war in Iran. In the United States Senate, Republicans already joined Democrats in a vote on a similar war powers resolution that passed the Senate against Donald Trump's war in Iran. And so, in, as John Thune put it, an environment where nothing's a safe or sure bet these days, Todd Blanche is now being offered to Republicans in the United States Senate as the next poisonous vote Donald Trump is asking them to cast. Especially poisonous for Republicans running for re-election in the Senate, facing strong challenges from Democrats. Those Republicans running for re-election will be asked to vote to confirm the architect of Donald Trump's slush fund, who is also the architect of Donald Trump's amnesty from prosecution for any tax crimes he may have committed in the White House up to now. We heard last night on this program, with the breaking news of Todd Blanche's nomination, that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, thinks it's possible that Todd Blanche's nomination will not win enough support of Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Whitehouse went down the list of Republicans on that committee, and he mentioned, among others, Senator John Cornyn of Texas as one of the possible defectors, especially after Donald Trump supported the scandal-plagued Attorney General of Texas against Senator Cornyn in the Republican Senate primary, which Senator Cornyn lost. So Senator Cornyn is now one of those Republican senators who was defeated in his re-election campaign by Donald Trump himself. And now, the day after Sheldon Whitehouse identified John Cornyn as a possible vote against Todd Blanche, CNN's Manu Raju reports, Senator John Cornyn told me he's undecided on Blanche as AG. Being Attorney General is probably one of the hardest jobs in the cabinet because you're working for the president, but you're also supposed to be able to tell the president no. So we need to talk about that. In his Senate confirmation hearing, will Todd Blanche be able to credibly tell Senator Cornyn that he has ever said no to Donald Trump about anything? The oldest United States Senator, 92-year-old Chuck Grassley, is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he used the old math today to calculate the chances of Todd Blanche's Senate confirmation.
Based on the proposition that every Republican on the committee voted for him less than a year ago, and based on the proposition that every Republican senator voted for him a year ago, the answer is yes.
Yes, Senator Grassley's right. If every Republican who voted for Todd Blanche for Deputy Attorney General votes for him for Attorney General, he will be confirmed. But today, John Thune said that's not the situation we're in anymore. And today, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who's running for re-election, is one of 3 Republicans who voted against the Trump-Blanche slush fund on the Senate floor, a vote Senator Collins obviously believes she has to cast to be re-elected in Maine. So, can Susan Collins vote to confirm the person who Mitch McConnell called utterly stupid, morally wrong, as Attorney General, and defend that vote to Maine voters in November? Can she vote for the architect of the Trump-Blanche slush fund? Retiring Republican Senator Thom Tillis, who eagerly welcomed Donald Trump's cabinet announcements at the beginning of the Trump presidency, said this today.
I haven't made a decision yet. The key for Todd or anybody going through Judiciary Committee is being pretty tight on January the 6th. They better not have said for 1 minute that the people that beat up police officers like these right down here were righteous people. You come even close to saying that, you don't have a chair of getting my vote in Judiciary.
Okay, so if you're even close to saying that the Trump-Blanche slush fund can go to people who beat up police officers, Thom Tillis has promised to vote against you. So here is Todd Blanche testifying that people who tried to kill police officers would be eligible for the Trump-Blanche slush fund that Todd Blanche himself designed.
Mr. Attorney General, this is an outrageous, unprecedented slush fund that you set up. Simple question, will individuals who assaulted Capitol Hill police officers be eligible for this fund?
Well, as it makes plain, anybody is
just let me know if they're eligible for the fund.
As was made plain yesterday, anybody in this country is eligible to apply if they believe they're a victim of weaponization.
Mr. Attorney General, let me ask you this. Are there going to be rules that say that if you've assaulted a Capitol Hill police officer or committed a violent crime, you will not be eligible? Why not make that a rule?
I expect that, because I'm not one of the commissioners setting up the rules, I expect that there will be rules.
You're appointing 4 of the 5 members, aren't you, Mr. Attorney General?
Pardon me?
You're appointing 4 of the 5 members.
I am appointing
You can
all 5
certainly
members.
set up the rules. I would hope you would make a rule that anyone convicted of assaulting a police officer or a violent crime is simply not eligible. They should not apply.
Well,
let me ask you this, because you compared it to the Keepsiegel case. But I think you know full well that in that case, the settlement agreement was approved by a federal judge, including the payments to people who were not originally parties to the lawsuit. No federal judge has approved this fund, have they, Mr. Attorney General?
no federal judge did approve this.
If that's not good enough for Thom Tillis, then Thom Tillis is, once again, just not telling the truth about what will actually decide his Senate vote.
Joining us now, MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian, Ashley Parker, staff writer for The Atlantic and an MS Now political analyst, and Barbara McQuade, former U.S. attorney in Michigan, MS Now legal analyst and author of the new book, The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of Mob-Style Government. Ken, what more do we know about what's in this plea deal and what happens next in this case?
Well, there is a change of plea on the docket right now, and we understand that John Bolton will plead guilty to this single count of retaining classified information on June 26th at the end of the month. And then he will face a judge later in sentencing. And the terms of this deal, it's a pretty broad array of possibilities here, from 0 to 60 months in prison. So 0 to 5 years in prison. The deal also calls for a $2.25 million fine. So a significant penalty here for one count of retaining classified information, as we understand it, as part of a personal diary entry that was used to prepare for his memoir and was seen by his wife and daughter. So no allegation that he leaked to the media, no allegation that he transmitted classified information to a foreign adversary, although those allegations were in the original indictment. He was charged with transmitting. He's pleading guilty to retaining. And what we should also point out is that the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes, is telling us that this was a very serious matter, that this was a bad breach of classified information. He's not going into details, but he's been briefed on this. And so while many people have viewed this case as an example of weaponization, and it may well be in some aspects, it's also clear that there was some substance to the allegations. John Bolton has decided to plead guilty to forego the possibility of decades in prison and millions of dollars in legal fees, but he does face the possibility of some time in prison and a very hefty $2.25 million fine. Ariel.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to those distinctions between this case and the cases that have faced other political adversaries of President Trump. But Barb, you know, the question on a lot of people's minds now is Bolton is now facing up to 60 months in prison, as Ken was mentioning. Do you think he's going to get that? Is he going to serve time?
I doubt he'll get the full 60 months, 5 years. That is a cap. So oftentimes parties sort of agree to disagree as to what the ultimate sentence will be and leave it up to the judge, as it appears to be in this case. But they've agreed it won't exceed 60 months, and the judge won't be able to do that. I think there are many mitigating factors here. John Bolton has served his country honorably. He did not share this information with hostile foreign adversaries. But there is an arrogance in sharing classified information with one's family members. They don't have clearances. And although I'm sure he trusted them, one of the allegations in this indictment that was disturbing is why you can't share it even with people you love and trust. And that is that his emails were hacked by Iran, which then shared them and had access to them. So it demonstrates the harm when someone acts very recklessly with classified information. So I'm sure he will argue to the judge why a lower sentence is more appropriate, but he's also going to face this $2.25 million fine, which is a significant penalty.
It sure is, and I'm glad you brought up that sort of circuitous way that this was all unearthed. Barb, what does it say to you that Bolton only pleaded guilty to one of 18 counts that he was facing?
Not unusual. Oftentimes when parties want to resolve a case, and in classified information cases, the government has a strong incentive to resolve the case because to show its evidence also risks disclosing more classified information. And so it's not uncommon to resolve a case by pleading guilty to, say, only one count. But importantly, the sentencing guidelines say that the court is permitted to consider all of the relevant conduct when fashioning a sentence. So even though it's capped at 5 years, the judge is going to look at all of this conduct, including the Iranian hack, when it's deciding what's the appropriate sentence in this case.
And Ashley, you heard Ken say there is a distinction between this case and others that we've seen generated from the DOJ against Trump's political foes. But is this a victory for President Trump, or at least is he going to tout it as such as he goes after his political adversaries?
I would absolutely expect him to tout it as such, in part because a lot of the other cases he and his Department of Justice have brought against his political enemies have not been particularly successful, have been thrown out by judges or even by, in at least one case, grand juries, and have felt a lot like amateur hour. And this is a case where I believe the investigation started under the Biden administration. This is a case, again, where you have someone who should have known better. John Bolton absolutely understood that sharing notes of what he saw in the Situation Room or what a national security advisor told him over unsecure email with family members, even family members he trusted, would have been a breach. John Bolton is not someone, who could plausibly argue that they were naive to the rules of government and national security. And this is one where it looks like John Bolton is about to accept a plea deal, which means he is admitting some guilt. And so this is, from the president's point of view, a far better, more vindicating outcome than some of these other cases, which have not gone anywhere.
And Barb, as we've been discussing, the genesis of this case was Bolton's 2020 book about the president that was called The Room Where It Happened. In that book, he uses phrases like the intel briefer said, and while in the Situation Room, I learned. Is this what distinguishes this case from other national security officials who have also written books about their time in their capacities?
Yes, there's a process when somebody wants to write a book who's had one of these sensitive positions, and that is you have to go through a pre-publication review. I think John Bolton even did that, and yet he still included some of these kinds of things. Even if the book didn't disclose classified information, the fact that he shared it with his wife and his daughter alone, sent it on an unsecure email, that is what was criminal about this case. And of course, seeing the risk when that got intercepted. And so, it's perhaps less egregious than when someone shares it with a reporter. As we saw, remember Reality Winner had done that. She got 60 months for sharing classified information. She was an NSA contractor, sharing things with the media. But disclosing this, being so reckless and careless in the way he handled it, I think is what made the difference in this case.
And as you mentioned, he's an official who theoretically should have known better. Ken, the resolution of Bolton's case appears kind of similar to what we saw happen with former CIA director and retired General David Petraeus. But Petraeus only pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor, and Bolton's pleading guilty to a felony here.
Yes, and I think Barb put her finger on the distinction between these two very similar cases. David Petraeus was gathering material for a book, and he put highly sensitive, highly classified material in these sort of notebooks, which he then turned over to his ghostwriter, his co-author, a woman with whom he happened to be having an affair. And he got caught, and he pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor. The difference is, though, that John Bolton's emails allegedly were hacked by the Iranians. And that's how the United States learned about the fact that this highly sensitive information was in Bolton's possession, because they got some highly sensitive collection from the Iranian government, according to the allegations of the indictment and other reporting we've done. And so the damage here is what is the difference between those two cases. There was no allegation or information that I'm aware of in the Petraeus case that any of that information got in the wrong hands. In this case, it did, even though John Bolton didn't intend for that to happen. His alleged recklessness and negligence caused that to happen, and that may explain the difference here between a misdemeanor and a felony in these cases.
Ashley, do you expect that getting this guilty plea against Bolton will embolden Trump's DOJ to go after other political enemies?
It's a good question. On the one hand, this will be a victory that he can tout, that we would expect him to tout on Truth Social and elsewhere. But we've also seen that often when this president gets a victory in any realm, that does not suffice, and it does, in fact, embolden him. We've seen that on foreign policy. There were people in his administration who told me that had the raid on Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela not gone so well, that they don't think that we would be in the situation we are with Iran right now. So, looking back at history and how this president has behaved previously, I would say he is likely to be emboldened, but that doesn't mean that these other cases, if they are grounded in less compelling facts and evidence, will go the way that this one against John Bolton did.
Barb, I want to circle back to something that you mentioned when it comes to vetting a book from someone in the national security realm. Should there be more checks and balances before these officials are allowed to publish information about their time serving the president?
I think there's already sufficient review process. In fact, if anything, sometimes people complain that it's quite cumbersome and that it takes a long time to get that review done. In this case, there was even a block on the publication of the book at one point because of a dispute between John Bolton and the intelligence community. So I think the system worked. I think the problem here is that John Bolton violated the trust that he had received in exchange for his position and the security clearance that he received by sharing information with family members. I think it is a good reminder of the importance of protecting the nation's secrets when they are shared with you.